Community Council meeting, and we have lots of things on the agenda tonight, but I'd like to start out by our leadership team roll call. So if you want to, let's start for the opposite end this time. We'll just kind of go back and forth. So Cindy, if you start on this.
Okay. I'm Cindy Munt. I'm Supervisor, Hideout Assistant, and I do the Community Information and Outreach for the Community Council.
And I am Glenn Crackdale. I'm your representative on the Community and Economic Development Advisory Committee.
Michael Lilienthal, I represent Public Safety.
John Lytle, District 1 Supervisor.
Dick Ross, General Observer, and how did that happen, guys?
John Davey, I'm the chair of the Dorado Hills APAC, and we look at proposed developments in the community and provide resident feedback.
And I'm John Davey, Infrastructure, District 1 Planning Commission.
And then we'd also like to recognize anyone who's here as a volunteer for one of our commissions or committees. So why don't we start with John Rasler, and then we'll kind of move around from there. You want to just introduce yourself, John, what you do as a volunteer for District 1, basically? If you don't want to, you don't have to. You're trying to get additional help. This might work.
That's a surprise. John Rassi, I'm a resident at Four Seasons, and I have been a volunteer ombudsman for seniors in assisted living for about 7 years now. Until recently, it was only 2 of us that were left, but now we have 4 new people in training so that we can cover all of the new facilities that are being built here in El Dorado Hills. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Stansberry, resident of El Dorado Hills, and I am the chairman of the County Human Rights Commission. Any questions?
You've done a big job. Go get them, Alan. It's a tough job. So, any other volunteer committee members? Oh yeah, Wendy May.
My voice is loud enough. I am your favorite county tax assessor appeals director. I've been a volunteer for 20 years in our fine county and about 7 years in this position. So happy to answer any questions if you have any about your taxes.
Very good, and thank you all. I would like to also mention we have a special guest this evening. Rafael Martinez, our Director of Transportation, is here. So he's sitting back hiding. You can run, but you can't hide. So he's here to contribute to some of the discussions relative to some roadway things going on, the vineyards a little bit, maybe Saratoga a little bit. But we didn't want to detract by focusing only on infrastructure, so we have lots of other things going on. So with that, I would like to move to item 2, adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Does anyone on the leadership team have any recommended changes? Okay, seeing none, we'll accept that as adopted. Item 3, public comment. So this was the period in the meeting that we would encourage anyone who wants to speak to a topic, ask a question, make a comment of something that's not on tonight's agenda. Please come forward and voluntarily identify yourself. Use the microphone. It's a little bit easier to get up in the videotape replays and for others in the room. So anybody who wants to speak to the leadership team this evening in the public comment section. Okay, Joel.
Joel Wiley, I'm a resident of El Dorado Hills. I would just like to say thank you to the El Dorado Hills Fire Department and the county library for providing the space for the polling stations, 4-day polling stations. Just wanted to say thank you.
Very good. Yes. We have a great community with a lot of organizations pitching in to help the county with voting centers and other things. So the fire department is one of those great organizations that we have. The community services district is one of those great organizations. So all very thankful for their support of these things. So seeing no other public comment, we're going to move right to item 4. Tonight's guest speaker is Elizabeth Leslie. She's with the League of Women Voters, and we asked her to speak on the El Dorado County voting center experiences, because I know a lot of the voters have already gone to the voting centers. They either dropped off their ballot or they've gone ahead and voted, and then talk about nearby locations for tomorrow's election day, because they're still open tomorrow all the way up to, I think it's 8 p.m. So, and you're accompanied by, I'll let you introduce your cohort there, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. Does anyone here know what the Voters' Choice Act is? Crickets. Okay, so that was approved by the legislature in 2016, established by Senate Bill 450. I had to look up the number. But the Voters' Choice Act was started sort of as a pilot with, I think we had 5 counties, and then they moved on to add additional counties for this particular election. It's a voluntary system where you are allowed more ways and more days to vote. The idea that the legislature had behind passing this is to encourage more people to vote. As you are probably aware, there's a lot of people not voting. So here in California, we're trying to encourage more people to vote. So thus the vote center model. And why am I here on behalf of the League of Women Voters? Because we've supported and we've continued to observe the implementation of this law. So we are sort of the watchdogs, if you will, to make sure that everyone's doing it right. Obviously, we've been doing election observing for about 100 years, so we kind of know what we're doing. And so it's pretty exciting for us to be here on the eve of the election. I can tell you that our county has done an amazing job at promoting vote centers. Most of you probably received this very tiny postcard with all of the vote centers on there listed. This is really an important aspect of reaching people and telling them that they have more ways and more days to vote. And I also wanted to highlight, I had a really wonderful experience at the fire station where I went to vote yesterday with my whole family. And I met Joel there. Thanks, Joel, for helping me. And everyone was friendly. There was easy parking. There was no line. My husband chooses to vote by mail and likes to drop his in. I like to actually go and vote. And I bring my daughter. So vote centers also accommodate, the ability to vote in the way that you want to vote. I also brought with me tonight a bit of an expert. He's our civic engagement coordinator, and he's been working on the VCA implementation along with a group of sort of good government and registrars called the Future of California Elections. And they're a group of folks that are committed to making sure that we're doing this right. And I brought Andrew with me because he knows every detail there is about vote centers. But I want you to take a moment, if you will, and tell people why vote centers are important and some of the problems that they solve for people. Sure.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Meese-Fisher. This is my bread and butter, so I decided to tag along. And that is the Voters' Choice Act in a nutshell. Election day is tomorrow. So what does this mean for you? With the Voters' Choice Act, you have 3 ways to return your ballot. For most of you, I'm sure some of you have already returned it by mail. That is one main way. It's not too late to return it by mail. If you're going to do that, just make sure you sign your envelope and get it posted by tomorrow. And you don't have to put a stamp on there, it's all postage paid. The second option is to go to a drop box. So those are located throughout the community, in businesses, in public buildings like libraries. I know there's one at Mountain Heights that you can go to during business hours if you wanted to get pizza and drop off your ballot. And that works. That's simply pretty much just like a mailbox. You'll fill out your ballot, put it in the envelope, sign the envelope. No stamp necessary, you'll put it in there, and then it's going to be collected by the elections office that day. And then the third option, the option with the most choices, is a vote center. So that's like a new and improved polling place compared to the old system. There are fewer of them in the county, but the trade-off is you can go to any one in the county. So I know there's one down the street at the firehouse, there's one at the library, there's one at the Wellness Center in the El Dorado Hills, but you can go to any one. If for some reason you're going to be in South Lake Tahoe tomorrow skiing, but you forget to vote, you can go there and vote, and you're going to get the ballot that has your candidates and your issues on it. If you didn't get a ballot, that's going to be the place where you want to go. If you have, if you're no party preference, or what some people call an independent voter, you can get a new ballot with the political party that you want to vote for. You can also re-register to vote, and that's been streamlined. So you just have to fill out a very quick form. So the bottom line is, you can go to a vote center. You can get a ballot if you're not registered. All on the same day. You can get it if you don't feel like you have the ballot that reflects the party you want to vote for. If there's any issue, if you made a mistake and you want to get a new ballot, you have a lot of different options. So those are going to be opening 7 a.m. tomorrow and close at 8 p.m.
And just a couple other things to add. I think that the vote center models, especially for our young nomadic people in California, are pretty important. One of the largest barriers of voting for young people that have historically not shown up to vote is that they move and they never update their voter registration. They think the post office does it, which is not true. So this eliminates some of the issues of young people like, oh, I don't know where I'm registered, I don't know what to do, because we now in California have same-day voter registration. So tell all the young people in your life that say, no, I missed the deadline, they can go and they can register and vote at the same place at the same time at any of these vote centers. That's really important. Also, several candidates have dropped out of the presidential race, and we've gotten a lot of questions in our office about, okay, what happens now? I've already voted and the candidate is not there. Well, unfortunately, if you've already turned in your ballot, that's it. If you have your ballot in hand, you can go to the vote center and get another one if you've already marked it. So you can get another one and then vote for a candidate that you think is still possibly not going to drop out of the race. So it just gives you a lot of options. And it also allows some streamlining for the county elections folks within the county, the different poll workers. So they have access to the whole list from the county. It used to be you had to go to only your polling place and only they had your record. So this is just administratively also a lot easier. But I will say the league is going to continue to observe the results of this and see what this does to turnout. And I think it's going to take more than one election cycle for us to really be able to fully analyze whether we think this is successful. But so far, so good. Again, it is resolving a lot of the problems that people have had, that calls, I forgot this, I don't know what to do with that, I lost my ballot. All the problems that you have can be solved at vote centers. So does anyone have any questions for us? It's a whole lot of information. Yes, sir.
A big concern with this, with these changes is, fraud. And how, with these ballot places being in, regular businesses and so forth, can you review how you keep those ballots secure and so forth and alleviate those concerns of fraud?
So I think that, have you cast your ballot yet or been to
Yes.
a vote center? Okay, so you'll see that they have, they're pretty locked. They're almost like a locked mailbox. Like you can't get a hand in, you can't do any of that. So the election officials are all trained, and they're very specific people with this training. They're only allowed to pick up the boxes with the ballots. And election fraud is extremely rare, despite what you read on social media. So here in California, I think there's like 0 cases in the last 2 years of anyone convicted of voter fraud. So we don't have any concerns as far as the League of Women Voters, but again, we continue to observe, and we have people that will be stationed at different elections offices observing as election observers to see how this process goes. So again, I can't say too much about all of it now, but I can tell you that the Secretary of State has taken great steps for all kinds of different cybersecurity, election security, additional training for all of the poll workers and the staff. So I have full confidence that there is not going to be any voter fraud, but again, the analysis will have to come post-election.
I forgot the term, but it's a new policy in which you can collect ballots from other people and so forth. And how does that work when you're picking up individual ballots from people and again, helping alleviate the concerns of fraud in that instance? Because it's not prevalent in many of the states. It's fairly unique to California. There's a lot, and not just on social media, but there's a lot of concerns with that practice. So.
And do you mean when there's a place where you can sign on the mail-in
Yes.
ballot that says, I'm turning this in for someone?
Yeah.
Yes. I don't have a lot of direct experience with that to speak to it, except that all of the signatures are verified. So there is someone that's checking to make sure people aren't voting twice and that the signatures do match. And I can tell you, I went on the El Dorado County election site today and I saw that there are actually ballots being held up to have their signature verified. So there's a certain amount of time that they have to send them back or be called in to re-sign and verify that. So that we have, to this date, and I've worked for the league for 14 years, I have not had heard of any cases ever of a situation of someone dropping off a ballot that was fraudulent.
So that's referred as provisional ballots, where they actually collect the ballot, but they can't verify this, or is there another title for it?
This is, I think, what he's referring to. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you get your ballot, I actually have one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, in here it offers you the opportunity of someone else turning this ballot in for you. And in fact, Joel, I think you may have checked it for my husband when he actually wasn't going to come to the vote center and I wanted pictures, so he had to come. And so he had already asked me to sign, and it's this portion here that says, I authorize the person below to turn this in. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, the term is canvassing. So.
Actually, it's ballot harvesting.
Harvesting, you're right.
So there have not been any convicted cases or any legislation that I've heard of that has caused any sort of problems. I can tell you the only concerns that we have had, and we're currently in litigation that I can't speak to directly, is some of the people that have registered to vote at the California Department of Motor Vehicles. Now that is a tougher situation, but we're actively in a lawsuit right now. I can't speak any more to that, but just know that we're observing that and trying to make sure that the data collection is done properly there. But otherwise, I've not heard of any other problems.
Yeah.
What's the control on people registering to vote but just changing their name and then registering to vote multiple times, which was fraud, but I don't see how your system can catch that.
So with the vote center system, part of the law requires them to develop a system where they can track ballots. Because if you can go to any vote center, you have to be able to double check if someone from South Lake Tahoe comes up here to vote, that they haven't already voted, that they haven't already mailed in their ballot, which might be an issue. So they have what's called an e-poll book, so they can check it real time to make sure that a ballot hasn't been cast by one person. If it has, then that person's already voted, they can't vote again. They're able to track that in real time.
That was my question. My question is, if someone decides to change their name, they want to be John, James, Jane, whatever last name is the same address, what system do you have to check to make sure that that isn't somebody who's registering to vote multiple times?
There is a database that the Secretary of State uses to track addresses and people at addresses. When you register to vote, if you say you get married, you do have to re-register to vote with your changed name. So again, that is tracked by the Secretary of State's office, not the League of Women Voters. We aren't the government, so we don't have access to those records. But again, we do the observation to make sure that the implementation of the laws protecting people are done correctly. But the Secretary of State has many systems in place to counteract any possible fraud. Also, this is why vote counting takes so long in California. We have a lot of people here. It takes a long time. But to do this double checking, it takes time. So that's why when people get impatient, I'm like, let them do their work. Also, there's a lot of different counties are handling this in different ways, but you have ballot tracking mechanisms. So you can go in and track your own ballot as well. But again, really there have been no cases of fraud reported in the 14 years I've been with the League. So while I appreciate your concern, it hasn't seemed to rise to the level of any type of lawsuit. And I do believe the checks and balances that have been put in place are working.
Well, we have a saying in medicine, if somebody says it's 100% that this is going to cure you, they are just scamming you. So your idea that there's been no reported frauds, mean they aren't looking, because there's going to be some. It's the same thing.
Well, I've said no litigation. There haven't been lawsuits. I'm not saying that someone hasn't tried to do anything hinky. But I can say in this county, for example, some people did get 2 ballots. So they are going to have to do a good job at checking in this county to make sure, because of this no party preference issue, people requested another ballot. So that means they have 2 ballots in their hand. So they are going to have to implement a system of checks and balances to make sure that that is properly reported.
Is that a place where we can look at the record to see how often that occurs? Call on the state, picks that up, checks it? Do they have any of those records that the public can see? Because the idea that they are checking it as the government, I'm sorry, I don't trust them.
Well, they have to issue a statement of the vote that includes all of the pertinent information except for the personal information after a certain time. I forget how many days till they certify the election, but they have to issue that information afterwards that is released to the public. But as far as a place where you can go and look at it, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look a little deeper to see what I could find for you.
That would seem to be the purview, one of the purviews of the league, if you look at some of that kind of data.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Go ahead.
There was a lawsuit against the state of California that forces the state to call out 1.5 million bad voter registrations. There are people who died and the voter registration is still in place. You know how that process is going to get those people off the record?
I do not. That would be a question for the Secretary of State's office. We haven't been directly involved with any type of voter database purging at all. That's not our area of expertise.
What is needed to register same day?
What is needed to register same day at the vote center?
Sure. So if you've never registered before, it's good to go in with some identifying factor. Driver's license is the go-to. A state ID works as well. But if you don't have that, then you can also use like a utility bill or something that just proves your residence address. Because the main thing they want to know is that you're not already registered, and they want to know that you're registered and voting in the right address.
Someone noted that there was barcoding on the ballots and stuff this time around, and I don't remember if there was before or not, but is that a new feature? You know, what is contained within the barcode? What are we trying to track with that?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if it's something that's changed. I think if it's on the ballot, it's going to be to identify the different ballot that you have, because within El Dorado Hills or El Dorado County, there's a lot of different ballots for different congressional, different state senate districts. So my guess is that it would be a way of identifying which specific ballot and how to count it from the board.
Okay.
We live in an area where the mail is getting stolen out of the mailboxes at night. I think a lot of people. Is there any way to tell if our ballot was actually received and counted?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the Secretary of State just released a new program to track your ballot. I believe El Dorado County is participating, so you can look and follow and see where your ballot is. And you could also, if you wanted to go to a vote center, they could clarify whether or not your ballot was a record. Yeah. And if that was like an ongoing concern in your community, it really sounds troubling. You can, obviously, you can register at your address, but select if you have a P.O. box to receive your mail if you just wanted a sense of security. I'm sorry?
You can find a mailbox somewhere. That's the way we get around this whole. But I'm just wondering if that's right. So if I go to the Secretary of State's website, I can look in there.
Yeah, and the program is called Ballot Tracks.
Thank you.
And it's vote.ca.gov.
They have so many URLs.
I think that'll get you to everything you ever needed to know.
Sir, you talking about the Track My Ballot? I did it to test it out. Okay. So I signed up for it, and then I didn't submit my ballot, and I waited. It was like 7 or 8 days later. They hounded me. They called me, and they signed up for a call and a text, and they said, "Hey, we haven't got it yet. So turn it in if you haven't, or get a new one." And then I turned it in, and the next day, they called in, text me saying, "We received it. It's been processed."
Now, was that through El Dorado County?
It was whatever's inside of that ballot. It was Track My Ballot, CA, whatever. But it's
so
just
it's through the Secretary of State.
Whatever's inside of that envelope there.
Looks like it's voter status through the state, the Secretary of State's website.
I'll ask one real quick. So, if you're out of your area, you go to a polling center, a vote center, and they have all the different ballots in different areas based off assembly, state, supervisor district, CSD. They have enough of those at all the voting centers for all the different.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, in most cases, assuming there's no hiccups, they will be able to print it while you're there. And then you can fill it out.
Okay. So used to the.
Great question, though. It makes it sound like there'd be piles of stuff everywhere. Yes, sir.
So I'm trying to get my mind around this idea of the Dropbox. So the Dropbox is you just go in now with a ballot, you drop it into that box, you have someone there who's watching the people put it in. And it's different from what we had before where you could actually register, go to a machine and fill out the ballot. Am I correct in that?
You're correct. All those options are available. You can go to a vote center and simply drop off your ballot, or you can vote with a traditional fill-in-the-bubble ballot. Also, there are places that are only drop box locations, they're called, where you cannot vote by filling out the bubble. You can only drop your ballot into the box.
All right, thank you.
Anything else?
Did everyone here vote?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'd like to thank Elizabeth and Adam for coming up and sharing with
Oh, and there was one other little piece of information. You can go on Eldorado County election site and you can see how many people have cast their ballots. And so it said 48,000 ballots have been turned in. That's out of 124,000 folks here registered here. And out of that number, 1,800 were cast at vote centers. So that's
There's some
a good
statistics.
start.
Yeah.
It was a good start.
Good. The other thing I've heard a lot is people are waiting till the last minute to turn their ballots in or to go and vote. And obviously with the Democratic primary, it was kind of explained. There's a reason for that, right? People drop out and they want to make sure they vote for a viable candidate if they're on the Democratic side of the ticket. So, yeah, interesting statistics. I wanted to add a couple of things that aren't on the agenda because they came in just recently to update you on some items. The first one is Assemblyman Kevin Kiley's bill, which was called AB 1928. If you recall, we had mentioned that this bill was to attempt to repeal AB 5, which is a contractor's law that basically takes away the ability to be a independent contractor from the standpoint you have to either be part of an organization and collect benefits, or you have to have a special exclusion or other things. But anyway, it came to the vote last week, and it was 55 against and 15 in favor of it. So unfortunately, it wasn't even close. But I still respect Kevin for all he's trying to do. He's trying to do the right things, but unfortunately, his message is not being heard. So that was kind of a disappointment, but it's not the first of those types of disappointments. I also wanted to mention a thing that I received recently from Fiona Ma, who's our state treasurer, because it gives you a little bit of background on what's happening at the state level with Governor Newsom's recent state address. And it says, kudos to Governor Newsom for continuing to allocate more funding and incentives for all types of living in California. He underscored his commitment to housing by making it the sole subject of a State of the State address. He is keenly aware of the challenges facing California, including the need for a comprehensive plan dealing with homelessness, the lack of affordable housing for workforce families, and the urgency of building supportive and adaptive housing for those on fixed incomes, people with disabilities, and seniors so we can age in place. So it's a broad category with housing is the primary emphasis. I'm proud to work with Governor Newsom's administration to streamline state processes so that we can accelerate the delivery of an unprecedented $1.75 billion investment in last year's budget to increase housing and $500 million annually for the state's housing tax credit program that is in this year's budget. So the message is there's a big push for housing, and in El Dorado County we really have to get serious about looking at affordable housing and what can we possibly do to create an affordable housing opportunity for various builders. So we've had long-term discussions at the county level. There's going to be special presentations made to the board here in the very near future. But it's a key thing that we need to really recognize, and this comes down to what they call the RENA numbers and a lot of other things that I'm not going to bore you with tonight. But the other thing that's kind of interesting, this was a quotable item that came out. It says, building affordable housing in California costs on an average 3 times as much as Texas or Illinois, according to the federal government. So obviously the cost of affordable housing in California is way in excess of what it is in most other states, with Texas and Illinois, I guess, both being on the low end of it. But that's one of the struggles we have, is how do you build affordable housing when it costs so much money to try to make it happen. So, moving away from that, El Dorado County last week, the end of the week, just put out a fact sheet addressing the Central El Dorado Hills project and kind of some near-term activities that are going to be going on. So for those of you who have not seen that, the El Dorado Hills Central Dorado Hills project is all the land behind Rayleigh's and behind the Station 85, includes the Pedregal, so it's like 400 acres, I think. The 98-acre golf course is a portion of that. But the fact sheet was to try to explain the upcoming events. So this is kind of a lot of words, but I'm going to read it very quickly. Just for clarity, the El Dorado County Planning Commission heard the item and received public testimony on November 14th and December 12th and January 13th, which was here in El Dorado Hills as a special meeting. After the third public hearing on January 13th, the Planning Commission closed the public hearing and continued the item to February 13th, 2020 for deliberations. On February 13th, staff recommended continuance of the item to March 26th, 2020. That's the important date that's coming up, March 26th, to provide sufficient time to respond to public comments and prepare an analysis of vehicle miles traveled, otherwise known as VMT, for the project. Staff will request a further continuance if additional time is needed to complete this analysis. A lot of people have been asking, why is this being delayed? Is some kind of government tactic? Well, no, it isn't. We're trying to avoid lawsuits, so let me go on with that part of it. Unless staff recommends another continuance, the commission deliberations will be held on March 26th at 8:30 a.m. in the Board of Supervisors hearing room. This is different. It's usually held in the Planning Commission hearing room. It's Board of Supervisors hearing room to provide for additional public seating. The deliberations are open to the public to attend, but with a limited exception of public comment about VMT discussed in more detail below. The public will not have the opportunity to provide written will not have the opportunity to provide written or oral comments at the meeting like they have at the last three commissions hearings on this item. While the commission did not request additional written comments submitted in advance of March 26th will be part of the administrative record for the project, but the commission will not accept written comment on the project at the meeting. The public will again have the opportunity to provide oral comments when the item is heard by the Board of Supervisors. So once the Planning Commission forwards a recommendation, then it'll be scheduled for a Board of Supervisors hearing, and that's the way the process works. This gets into CEQA and VMT. It says the California Environmental Quality Act does not require a VMT analysis for this project, but the county determined it would be appropriate to analyze in light of a recent court decision because the VMT analysis had not been prepared in advance of the January 13th commission hearing. The public can provide comment that is limited to the VMT analysis of March 26th. No additional oral public testimony, including general statements in support of opposition to the project, will be received on the 26th. Once the commission makes a recommendation on the project, it will be heard by the Board of Supervisors, at which time the public can provide oral and written testimony about both the project and the VMT analysis. So just to update you on the overall process, these things are pretty complicated, step-by-step sequences, but that's it in summary. So, yeah, John.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify something. County Council reached out to me to ask my preference. I'm now the chairman now of the Planning Commission, and I decided to I am going to open up public hearing only for the VMT, so people will be able to comment on the vehicle miles traveled. I wanted to err on the side of transparency, and so people have an opportunity to comment because, you know, that was decided, you know, later, you know, after we had closed public comment. So I'm going to be opening up public comment, but I'm going to have a real short leash when it comes to those comments, and people are going to stray away from vehicle miles traveled. I'm not going to allow that. So I wanted to qualify that we want people to have an opportunity to speak publicly concerning that at the hearing on the 26th. And I'm strongly encouraging staff that I really don't want to continue this project again. I really want to hold a hearing on the 26th. And so I'm encouraging, I've sent out a couple of emails today. I want a status update of that vehicle miles travel analysis from the consultant. So I'm trying to encourage them to get it done. So,
and get it posted.
And get it posted as soon as possible for public review. So,
yeah, I think my comment is going to go, that meeting's about 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
If the vehicle miles traveled is as long as most of the traffic studies that are done, you know, a minimum of 50 pages, it could be 250 pages, like the whole Central Dorado Hills Pacific Plan was. You know, for people like us who volunteer on APAC, we're not traffic engineers, we're not specialists, we're just citizens who are trying to get through these scientific studies, if you would. And, posting it the week before does not really allow us adequate time, or anyone adequate time, to review it, analyze it, ask questions before you're asking for our final comments on this. So please, I don't want you to delay the thing. I think we all want to get this thing going.
Yep.
But make sure you get it out there so the public has enough time to read it, analyze it, review it, and ask questions before it just gets rushed through a process.
I know, and again, because I've heard some of the comments that, the county's trying to slip this through, and so that's why I decided to open this up for the public, but only for that topic. So I'm meeting with the director and her staff, Tiffany Schmidt, this Thursday, and I'm going to be talking to them in more detail about that. I'd really like to get this out by our next planning commission meeting, which would be then 2 weeks to review it. So that's my goal, that's my desire. So, yes?
Could you please define vehicle miles traveled?
Vehicle miles traveled it's new. It's something it's replacing levels of service for environmental analysis, and I think it kicks in this summer. Now we still have we can still institute our ballot initiative levels of service initiatives that were done. So we still have that.
Provisions, yeah.
Pardon me?
Measure-wide.
Measure-wide. And so we still have those provisions in which we can hold them accountable, for them to mitigate their impacts. So in a nutshell, not to get into too many of the weeds, it's an effort from the state because that's going to be the CEQA compliance going forward. It's not level of service, it's going to be vehicles mile travel. The whole effort is to encourage, and I'm using a positive word, to encourage development along the major transportation corridors. They don't want all these developments out in the rural areas, and thus, all the miles of roads that you need to service, folks back and forth. They want to encourage development along the major transportation corridors. So the vehicle miles travel will, in a sense, punish you if you want to do that. And so it's strongly to encourage you to develop your development along your major transportation corridors in a nutshell. So,
higher density.
That's the push. Get out of your vehicle, walk, ride, vehicle miles traveled 0. That's the optimum from their particular perspective. And it affects commercial property as well as residential property. So this is just homes, it's where businesses are built. Because they want the businesses to be built where there's housing available, workforce housing, so I think the motivation is right for the most part, but sometimes it just feels like you're being force-fed. So
just still, I think a question about how it's implemented in a rural area.
So Raphael, would you like to comment at all on this? Because you would be our resident DMT expert. No? Okay. You'll let us struggle with this? Come on. Come on, Mr. More knowledgeable.
Commissioner Benya did such a great job at describing that. I really didn't feel I needed to, but since you asked, Supervisor, I will.
What rural area?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rafael Martinez. I'm the Director of Transportation for Dorado County. And sure enough, Commissioner Benya was pretty spot on. The purpose of VMT, Vehicle Miles Travel, is for the state of California to encourage or really more or less push communities, municipalities, and agencies to incorporate more transit, more biking, more walking. I'm sure most of you have noticed the bike paths that we've constructed along either El Dorado Hills Boulevard or Silva Valley. Those are all grants by the state of California. The state of California is pushing very heavily on alternate modes of transportation. What they want is for communities to be very close to working retail commercial areas so that there isn't heavy volumes of vehicles. Instead, that people are walking or biking or using transit to get to their destinations. This all came about with the Golden One Center. Golden One Center was the very first project that incorporated vehicle miles traveled into its calculations because they realized there was no way that they were going to get the level of services to be acceptable with as many vehicles that was going to go to Golden One when that new building was going to get constructed. So what they said is, let's create this new system that essentially incorporates transit or multimodal train, rail, and we are going to force people to utilize these other systems to get here. So, for example, if there is a community that is being built out in a rural area, it's going to be very hard for us to have an acceptable vehicle miles traveled, because guess what? There are not very many transit or rail or bike path or sometimes sidewalk that is reachable from those areas into a more populated area where some of the businesses and the work environment is located at. So it's going to be very interesting, because this is going to be the very first one that we actually review as a county. We've been asking exactly that same question, John, to the state of California. How are we supposed to incorporate this to a rural, mountainous community that is basically, essentially, only connected by roadways? And the state of California says, we'll figure it out together. Well, we're going to find that out come this June, because yes, this project actually is going to be the first one prior to the summer implementation by the state of California. But El Dorado Hills Central will be the first one that gets presented to us. We're going to have a third-party consultant analyze the data. My staff and myself are going to analyze the data, and then we're going to see where the chips fly. But Tim, to answer your question, I'm a traffic engineer, and I get confused sometimes. Look at those numbers. So it's going to be very interesting project to analyze, to say the least.
You got a status update on the timing, Rafael?
We should have the VMT numbers by the end of this week, if not sooner.
Okay.
Yep.
And then obviously that'll be my priority for you guys to get on that and review that.
Most definitely.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to transition into the first item that's actually bulletized on the agenda here, the Vineyards project. It was approved by the Board of Supervisors on a 3-2 vote. With 3 additional conditions being added. Let me describe the project very briefly. It's 114 acres on the north side of Malcolm-Dixon Road, very close to where the new intersection, where the overlook is, where that road is going to be opened up. It's right behind the overlook, basically. But the proposal that came forward was to, instead of having 19 5-acre parcels, to create 42 parcels in there. Instead of being 5 acres, the 42 parcels would be 1 acre each, with a lot of open space. So the bottom line is, of the 114 acres, there's 65 acres of maintained open space. It was proposed with the second project, and that's Oak Woodlands areas. They talked about vineyards in some of the areas, but it's maintained open space by an HOA. To me, that's expanding our inventory of open space, not reducing open space. Some people seem to be very confused by that, but it actually adds open space to our inventory of county zoned open space with the vote that was taken. I added 3 conditions because of APAC's considerations. Number 1, the concern was sewers versus septic. There was a lot of discussion back and forth, and so I conditioned the project such that any 1 acre lot that doesn't perk for septic cannot be built on. No ifs, ands, or buts, or workarounds, or anything else, it cannot be built on. So those 42 lots, there may be a number of them that don't perk. They can't build on that lot unless they choose to bring in sewer. And that's their choice. If they bring in sewer, I assume that they'll probably go out and perk every lot in detail to figure out where they are. And if they find out that 12 of their lots don't perk, sewer will probably be brought in. And that's the solution I was looking for, is whatever is the appropriate thing based upon what kind of drainage those soils have, individual lots and stuff. But that protects the community from having to contend with a haphazard way to try to address getting a septic system in to qualify for a lot that isn't on that property. They talked about using another person's property and all that stuff, and that just, it's too complicated. So that was one of the provisions. Another provision people were concerned about is if you put in vineyards, what kind of a setback do you have to allow for access and then spraying and that sort of thing, which will happen with existing residences. So the recommendation that came out primarily from our ag commissioner was 100 feet setback is the minimum we should consider. And that assumes you're doing hand spraying to kind of control where that spray is going, if it is a vineyard or whatever. So that provides assurances that if kids are out in the backyard playing or something or other, you have at least a 100-foot setback between that and where any agricultural operation would be. So I think that's a safety provision that really helps with that part of it. And then the third condition, I'm trying to remember what the third one was. Oh, it's relative to trails. There was a number of people concerned with putting in trails throughout the subdivision and attracting the public to come from outside areas to participate in the trails or maintenance of the trails and everything else. So the condition I put on it was that the developer was to design the trail system, which they've already laid out conceptually, consistent with what they think makes sense, but the trails would only be implemented if and when the HOA, the Owners Association Board, majority of the people of the HOA say, yes, we want these trails and we're willing to fund it and we're going to be willing to maintain it. Because that's the part I think is probably the toughest is, what is that trail system? Is it strictly internal to the project and is it private? Or is it have access to the external world and people will be encouraged to come and use the trails? So that should be an HOA decision in my opinion, so that was the third condition that was offered. So that's the way it got passed. There's some other traffic advantages to it. There is a condition with the Vineyards project as approved that the owner of the property will put in left turn lanes both in and out of Lock Way, which is the entrance to Sterlingshire. And that's supposed to be done, it's estimated within about a 1.5 year period of time of the start of actual construction out there. So fairly short timeline, non-reimbursable. It was estimated $1 million project to make that safety and vehicle flow improvement. And I do have a note here from a gentleman who actually lives out in Sterlingshire. He said, and this is Craig Witcher, he said, ironically on my drive home after yesterday's meeting, that's the one the vote was taken, I needed to turn left from Green Valley Road onto Lock Way. There was eastbound traffic, so I had to stop waiting to turn. I looked at my rear view mirror and saw 3 cars behind me. I wasn't so concerned about the first one because the driver saw that I was stopped waiting to turn. However, the SUV behind was still traveling quite rapidly. Fortunately, the driver did realize in time and was able to stop before there was a collision. There have been very many near misses in that intersection, and there's been some collisions that haven't been reported. So people need to recognize that a lot of people today, if they get in an automobile accident, they don't want to call the CHP, right? Because if their insurance isn't all paid up, if they don't have a legal license, if they don't have whatever, they're not likely to want to call the CHP and wait. They exchange insurance forms, or there's a cash offer, or something else, because a lot of people don't want to deal with having a CHP report filed. The only data our DOT has is when there is a CHP report filed. So that's the only we know about accidents is when somebody actually files them. But I know there's been several incidences of near misses and accidents I've heard about there. And if you know, it's the westbound is very difficult because it's a down slope and it's supposed to be 50 miles an hour, I believe, and people are easily traveling 65 and 70 sometimes coming down the hills and then they don't stop in time. So I think it was a very important improvement to the project, improvement of the flow on Green Valley Road, because you're no longer going to have to stop behind these people trying to turn left to get into Lock Way. You'll be able to pass them safely by, and they'll be safer because they won't have to be worried about rear-ending. So that was another major condition of the project. With that, I'd rather move away from that unless John or Raphael want to add anything. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just commend Raphael because we worked with him at the Planning Commission. We did we looked at the traffic study because the latest version we had a restriction. If everyone knows the Overlook project and they have the new access coming out on the Green Valley Road. Well, that's going to punch through to Malcolm Dixon. And that was the plan all along, to pull trips off of Malcolm Dixon and get them out to Green Valley Road. But even today, when I look online and see some people are still concerned about the S-curve and everything and how that we can improve in a project and they still don't understand, that's all going to get improved. That big S-curve, if you're familiar with it on Malcolm Dixon, is going to be teed off at both sides with a straight shot going into the development out to Green Valley Road and using that access, and it's already signed as Malcolm Dixon cutoff. And so the conditions of approval before we made some revisions with Raphael's help restricted the left out onto Green Valley Road. Well, what's the result of that? Well, all the trips coming out of the Overlook as well as those developments would have to go, if they wanted to go up to Cameron Park, they would have to go on Malcolm Dixon. And so we were able to make some adjustments because the secondary access had a restriction that didn't allow for a right turn. Well, we understand, some people will turn right, so we loosened up the restrictions a little bit and were able to relieve that level of service issue on Green Valley Road. So that made that project a lot better, again, with the effort, getting the trips off of Malcolm Dixon and getting out to Green Valley Road. And again, I wanted to emphasize again, a lot of this misinformation that's been out there about the locked way, that was in their environmental document, their EIR, to mitigate that impact. It wasn't just a safety thing, and it's been a condition of approval all the way along through this project and so forth. So the minor changes that we made traffic-wise technically brought that level of service, or that relieved them technically from making that improvement. But because they had already made that commitment to do that, they decided to go ahead and go forward with that, and that was at the last minute that we did that. But again, we made that overall better project from a traffic standpoint. Again, getting those trips off of Malcolm Dixon, which was originally planned when those projects were originally approved. Those improvements to get out to Malcolm Dixon or to Green Valley Road were done or were negotiated years ago. So I'm glad we made those changes. I wanted to thank Raphael for his efforts in doing that. So just wanted to qualify a few of those things.
Okay, very good. Question? Yes.
Gated community.
It is going to be a gated community. Yes. Right.
So the question I go to next is, open spaces within gated communities don't really mean open spaces for the general public, but for those who are related to where that open space is.
The original concept included a gate for pedestrian access to access the trail system, but there are neighbors there who don't want anybody else down Malcolm Dixon Road or anybody to use those trails. That's why the motion of the HOA should decide what they want to do with the trails. If they want to open it up to the public or not. There is no public parking there, which creates a problem.
That was one of our concerns today, Pat, was that they had talked about the open space and the trail, specifically the trail, not the open space, the trails as being sort of a project benefit for the community, but it's in a gated area and there is no parking. So our question was, well, how does, if it's a public benefit, how does the public access it? And so I believe that changed that conversation, that it's not a...
Well, the question obviously comes up with pedestrians and bicycles, right? Because a lot of people bicycle down that road, and I can imagine a trail system that winds through those hills and stuff would be an enjoyable place to ride, right? So I don't know, that again, it's the HOA that's going to decide what they want to do with that. The people who live there, not us who don't live there and don't have to suffer the consequences of whatever the decision is.
So as a footnote, those open spaces that are generally open to everyone are even more precious.
Absolutely. Yep. Public accessible open space is more precious than anything else. But when you think about it from a wildlife perspective and stuff, thoroughly, all the wildlife is going to enjoy oak woodlands and stuff where there aren't provisions where somebody can come and chop down the trees pretty much at will, because a lot of that goes up unsight unseen and just happens. So, John.
You know that the HOA will not open those trails to the public.
That's my guess.
It's not a guess. That's what's going to happen. And I'm thinking of what Heritage does. Heritage puts the bike trails outside the fence of their community, so people can use the trail, but they're not actually in Heritage. Okay. So here you're going to have bike trails that the general public won't be able to use, and I think that's
I think
not a good thing.
They have the homeowners association would have flexibilities where they put the fences up. Mm-hmm. If they want to put the fences back, basically provide recess to where the fence is compared to the property and put a trail around it. They can do those kinds of things with that property because it's designated as open space. If they choose to build an external trail system in open space, they could do that, but I don't think they want to maintain a trail that everybody else uses. So, maybe. One other thing you need to recognize is the Community Services District is very interested, as I understand at least, in annexing that property. Well, they can't annex it because it's not part of the sphere of influence. So the CSD is going through a process where it's basically a review of what they want to do to increase their boundaries. And part of the desired sphere of influence includes this piece of property. And it's probably several months away before that ultimately gets approved. But once that's included in the sphere of influence, then the CSD or the homeowners there could initiate annexation, and they could let the CSD take over the trail maintenance. So it could happen, but again, it's going to be up to the owners of the property. So,
I believe it's Santa Claus too.
Don't know. Okay, so, yes, sorry.
Okay, so of the 114 acres that are there now that are undeveloped, can anyone walk through them?
It's private property. There are people who walk through there, adjacent neighbors and stuff, but it is private property, so you're supposed to respect private property and only enter when you have permission, and so that's the official answer, right? We did take a walk through there, did a site visit, took a brief walk with permission of the property owners and being escorted and stuff. And so I think that was helpful for a lot of us who hadn't seen the back end of the property. I'd seen the front of it near Malcolm Dixon, but we went in a back access road and really looked at the water, where the water tank is in the back of the property, and the oak woodlands, the dense oak woodlands on the back side of it. And all of that stays as open space the way it's been approved, so that back end does. So there's pluses and minuses to planned development, PD overlay. To me, when you're creating open space in perpetuity, you really have to look hard, is that a favorable thing to do? And in general, I believe it is, because we're losing too much of our open space. If not for people use, at least for the wildlife use.
But what's really changing? If you went from 5 acres on 5 acres per lot on 114 acres, and you're looking at 23 homes, and now you're looking at 42 homes.
We were looking at 19 originally, and now 42.
Well, how big a difference is that?
So anybody who owns a 5-acre parcel basically can put their house anywhere they want, the way the previous plan was, and they can clear anything they need to be able to access the house. I mean, the county has provisions and all that kind of stuff, but I've seen how this gets done, right? You don't take the trees out till after the house is all approved and people leave, and then all of a sudden the trees disappear. Because you want to create an open space, or you want to have more sunlight for your garden, or whatever it is, right? But there's a lot of people who will abuse our oak resources management plan and just go and cut trees down. If it's a maintained open space, they have to do the vegetation management, keep the fire hazards down, and it's preserved for wildlife and the residents at least to access, maybe the public. So that's the advantage.
Well, I'm trying to understand, why are people so upset at you?
I can't answer that. Except the bottom line is people don't like growth. Some people don't like any growth. And particularly when you talk about increasing from 19 to 42 units, it's doubling, right? But when you look at the big picture of 187,000 residents and 137,000 whatever voters, and is 23 units a killer? Particularly when you look at 85% of the growth that's happened in El Dorado County in the last 8 years, is like the recent number I got, has been in El Dorado Hills, District 1 and District 2. This is in District 4. And it's an area called low density. Zoned for low density, which means it's not extreme rural residential. It's low density. So there's transitions that were planned in the general plan. A lot of people don't understand that, but I think for the most part, and I'm not trying to speak for them, it's just concern for housing growth, for traffic increases, all those kinds of things that none of us like to see. But with proper mitigation, I mean, that's the way the general plan is written. If you're going to work with the general plan, you have to accept growth. People don't like it. I don't know what else to say. We can change the general plan. And there's elements I would really like to change, but then you hear the other side of the spectrum where people don't change anything in that general plan. Board of Supervisors will screw it up, so don't change anything. Okay, then live with what's in there. It's a plan for growth. And we have to either live with what's in there, or we have to basically make changes. You can't have it both ways. But anyway, so that discussion will go on. It'll be controversial in every little project that comes up. And it's just one of those things we contend with our local society today. So. Okay, that's the best I can do with that one. Okay, then I'm going to suggest we go on to Saratoga Way and kind of get rid of all the traffic stuff at one time here. I did receive a letter, and I forwarded it to Raphael, because some of the residents that use Finders Way and Arrowhead Way to come down and access Saratoga are very concerned with Saratoga opening up at the end of March. The end of this month is supposed to be the opening date, unless, Raphael, did they tell you something later than that? They haven't told me anything, so end of March is what we're working to. There is going to be a lighted intersection at Wilson Way in Saratoga, but that's the only lighted intersection. But the people who use Finders Way and Arrowhead were very concerned about the traffic levels, speeders. They wanted to put in emergency 4-way stop conditions, or 3-way stop, depending on what the intersection is. I think most are a 3-way stop, to try to stop all the traffic until we could evaluate and determine if there had to be stoplights put in. The bottom line of all that is, I think the biggest unknown is how much traffic that road is really going to get. ADT is the average daily traffic level. The county monitors those, and there's been various estimates of that. I personally think the county's estimate's on the low side compared to what we're really going to see, but my estimate's no better than theirs, except gut feel. Right, so we really need to get the road opened up. We need to make sure it's safely operational from what it is, and we need to measure the traffic levels to determine if the traffic is high enough to do what they call warrant a lighted intersection or some other safety provision, a stop sign, something, in all three directions. But the last thing you really want to do is put in three-way stop signs or four-way stop signs. That's not conducive to traffic flow. And I've actually, in jest, brought up the idea that, well, maybe we could put a roundabout in there, but I don't think we want to go there either. You talked about roundabouts and J7, so. But I think it's the ideal solution for almost every traffic problem. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, so they had concerns. We're going to monitor those. But the other thing that's important to note, and Raphael can help me with this, is we're going to set up the controls of the lighted intersection at Wilson Way in Saratoga, which will basically allow a pause. If you're trying to get out of one of those two other areas, you're going to get a break in the traffic when that traffic light changes. And you'll be able to get on and make your left-hand turn or whatever it is. You've just got to be patient a little while to make that happen. But you've done the traffic analysis. This is your turn.
Well, actually, and this is a great opportunity just to educate the public as to how DOTs, municipalities, Caltrans sets not just stop signs, but speed limit signs as well. So essentially, back somewhere in, I think in the late 60s, early 70s, some municipalities set up bogus stop signs and fraudulent speed limit signs in order to generate additional revenue for their municipality. Well, the state of California intervened and said, you know what, you can't do that. There has to be justified engineering principle standards in terms of where these traffic control devices and or signs are to be installed. So it set up standards and said this is what is going to be the warrant analysis, either for stop signs and for speed limit signs. And as a matter of fact, I was just talking to Officer Brown back here from the CHP in terms of some warrant analysis that we're working on together, because we work very closely with CHP to make sure that we place them and we analyze them correctly, because without a proper warrant analysis for either a stop sign or a speed limit sign, they can't enforce that a traffic control device, which a sign is a traffic control device, in the court of law. So it's very important that we work together, we abide by the standards and the principles by the state of California, so that these traffic control devices are enforceable and that people actually obey them, because if they're not enforceable, people figure it out soon enough and start disobeying them. Furthermore, not to mention, if everybody got a stop sign where they wanted it, you'd all be going to work very, very late, because you'd be stopping at every intersection. We, and John can probably attest to this, we get hundreds, if not thousands, of requests for stop signs in El Dorado County. So we abide by the warrant analysis very strictly, and this is one location that we are going to, as soon as it opens up, we are going to do the analysis. I know a lot of people are requesting that I do the analysis ahead of time, but there's no way of doing the analysis because their traffic hasn't opened up on Saratoga to actually do a calculation for that. So because of that reason, there is no actual justification that I can go to a judge and say, look, judge, we did the numbers, here they are. So as soon as it opens up, we will be taking data down, and we will probably be doing that for 2 months thereafter, because we don't want to wait until traffic builds up above its capacity, and not to mention we want to make sure that as soon as it does meet the warrant, that we put in the stop sign. So I've made a promise to Supervisor Heidel that my staff will be committed to being out there doing the analysis, making sure that the warrant is performed on a weekly basis, and that we take good counts, and that if it is warranted, that we will install them. Otherwise, we will come up with some other mitigating factor to control and alleviate any kind of congestion that builds up at that location, or any safety hazard. We haven't seen any yet. There were some photos that were brought up to our attention by one of the residents in terms of the sun and at the time of day. That could be an issue, so we're going to definitely look into that once the roadway opens up. So, are there any questions regarding stop signs and speed limits? Do you have one? Yes.
So when Saratoga opens and you're going east on the new part, coming down the hill to Finder's Way?
Yes, yes.
There is no left turn lane to turn into Finder's Way. The other two streets farther down have a left turn lane. But the speed limit sign I saw through the fence is 45 the other way. So if someone's coming down the hill at 50 and I have to stop there to turn left into Finder's Way, will I get rear-ended? You were just talking about, why is there not at least a left turn lane?
Well, the reason why there isn't a left turn lane right now is because for every additional 12 feet of roadway width that you need to construct for any 100 feet, you're looking at approximately $100,000 to construct. So developers working with the county, we do the calculations as to what the traffic volume is going to be, and dependent on the volumes that we calculating, forecasting, we say, well, this location might need it, this one doesn't. I think, is it Arrowhead that's further down? Arrowhead. That one did have higher volume, so that one did include, I believe, a left turn pocket.
It's not at the bottom of the hill. The hill comes down and Finder's Way is right there. When you have to stop to turn left, it just seems very unsafe. There are, I would say, approximately, just off the top of my head, I can probably count 12 locations where we have similar turning movement implementations, but actually with higher volumes. If the volumes do increase, the good news is that we have the right-of-way to have work with the developer to have them widen that out. I don't anticipate that being an issue, but if my staff feels that there is going to be a potential for rear-end collisions at that location, just as we analyzed Lockway and Green Valley, based on the speeds and the number of people making that left, we came to the conclusion that that location was bordering an unsafe condition. If we feel the same thing, that location needs to be mitigated, we will look into mitigating that location. The good thing is that has funding behind it. We could actually allocate TIM fees for that, and it would probably happen in a much faster rate than an existing location such as Lockway and Green Valley. So I make sure that I look into that. I think I have another question here, if not I'll get back to you. Yes. Were you raising your hand?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you going to revisit the traffic patterns when the new Costco opens here in El Dorado Hills?
Well, actually, we're going to revisit the new traffic patterns before that. That's the critical part, to see what the traffic patterns are after Saratoga opens up, because that is going to, vehicles are like water or ants. They find a way of, getting to where they want to go the most efficient way. And so once Saratoga opens up, that's going to change circulation patterns. We're going to do analysis after that. If in the event that Costco does officially make its decision and come on in, then we will be using the most up-to-date, latest and greatest traffic volumes with whatever circulation we have at the time, and then calculate a forecast growth and say, this is what you have to build for, and we're going to be making sure that the analysis is very well vetted, not just by us, not just by their traffic engineer, but by third-party traffic consultant, to certify that the volumes and the impacts that they say that is going to be on our county roads is truly going to be it, and that we get the full amount of mitigation possible to make sure that it's as minimal an impact.
So the trigger point for that, though, is when Costco submits an application.
That's the
they
trigger
own the
point,
property,
yes.
escrow closes, they submit an application, then we can access and talk to their traffic engineers, and that dialogue starts.
I haven't,
way before Costco would be open, but we can't do it now.
I just had a preliminary conversation with their traffic engineer approximately, 8 months ago when they first said that they were going to be coming in. And ever since then, they've gone dark on me. And so I'm just anticipating for them to contact me, and when that point comes, that's when, it's down to business. So, yes, you had another question?
Yeah, John said that the traffic light on Wilson will be, set up to allow gaps for turning left out of like Finders.
Yes, yes.
But what about the traffic coming from El Dorado Hills Boulevard? I mean,
The gaps that we anticipate coming from there is going to be the signal light at Saratoga and El Dorado Hills Boulevard. So that light itself actually is going to be allowing the left turns going in, the right turns going in, the throughs going in, and dependent on the movement, we will be having sufficient enough green time in opposite directions to allow gaps to go through in there. All you need to make a left turn out or into any intersection is approximately 4 seconds. So 4 seconds can be found in any gap, in any period, in any signal timing process to allow for vehicles to come in and out. So, but we'll analyze that. Finders and Arrowhead have both been high on my radar since Saratoga's proposed opening by multiple residents, and I've already committed to the supervisor that it's probably not going to be my staff, it's probably going to be me out there doing the analysis personally to verify so that...
We welcome him to come down because we'll help him.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to hold me to coming down here just to make sure I can have first-hand knowledge as to what I saw out there and why I'm recommending to do this or that. So, by all means, yes?
I live on Platt Circle, so I take Finders every day. Right there, I live in Crescent Ridge.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah.
So I share my neighbor's sentiment about our concerns because we all have kids and dogs and we're all walking. So I do think the sun element that you mentioned is particularly important.
Yeah.
But again, I'm particularly worried about the kids and dogs, and the sidewalks there didn't continue down Saratoga. So there's no sidewalks that go all the way down. And then on Finders, as you look towards the Crescent Ridge sign, it's completely unfinished. It's dirt and mud and garbage, and so I don't know, is that going to be finished? And then as you head towards the surgery center, there's one sidewalk on one side part way down, but it's asphalt. So there's all kinds of stuff going on there, and I welcome you. I will bring you coffee when you come.
I am there.
I'm concerned about what that whole section there, and it's a hill. So 45 miles an hour, it's going to be 60.
Sure.
So, and there's children and dogs, so we're all freaking out. But it would be great if I did not know that it was opening the 30th. I'm also pretty new here, so. Also, the communication that you mentioned, it would be good to communicate about you need these 2 months to study that. Somehow to get that out, I think would help my neighbors a little bit.
I'll be working with Supervisor Heidel because he's the one making sure he's keeping a thumb on me just to make sure that I'm taking a look at that location and that I'm staying on top of the opening as well as the analysis that goes along with Saratoga. And part of the asphalt sidewalk is because we do plan on doing some widening, I think, in the future at some point, John. Isn't that true? And so then we weren't going to build it.
You don't want to put a bunch of concrete down and keep widening it out. So a lot of times, like in front of the surgery center, you see there's asphalt concrete. And so I forget what date is, but if it's like within the next 5 to 10 years and so forth, and that's a judgment call from staff. If they want to put an asphalt or concrete.
Because we have a walkability option there with the stores changing right there.
Yeah, that's true.
So if there's some attention can be given to that area, it could be much more walkable and we feel safer.
I'm sure you guys will be seeing me out there in my white SUV on more than one occasion, so I'm looking forward to it.
Might be an appropriate topic for an APAC meeting where we really look at that part of it later.
Oh, goody.
Or
I can't wait.
What we can do is just a homework.
Tim.
Why do we have you here? Why do we have Chief Lilly and Chief Johnson here?
Yes.
The third component that we always see, besides reducing speed limits, putting in signals or stop signs, is why don't we allow speed bumps that can use as a traffic calming and releasing?
Chief can answer that.
Well, I know, but let's get out in the public now so that we all know, because I know the answer, but let's share with the whole community as a whole. So, Chief?
So I would just say from the fire department's perspective, we're not generally in favor of putting traffic calming devices like that. Because when you think of apparatus weighing 35, 40,000 pounds, a truck that weighs 72,000 pounds, it takes a lot of energy to get those up and going, and once they're moving, they're moving. So anytime they're slowing down, that's delaying the response time to a potential incident. And then other than that, it could become a safety hazard for them in that they're doing a bunch of things going to an incident, whether they're looking for a hydrant, they're looking on a map, they're looking for the next closest resource that might be coming in. So having a bump there, that becomes a potential safety hazard for us. So just as a position of the fire department, we don't necessarily support those types of traffic calming devices.
And there's even more that I don't think speed bumps accomplish the objective that most people see them accomplishing and slowing traffic. Especially with our vehicles now, you can accelerate so quickly in between speed bumps. You're going 40 miles an hour before you get to the next one. And I think that you obviously can speak to the technical aspect of it, but we've done a lot of research. The fire department hired our own traffic consultant at the direction of our board of directors a couple of years ago to study this issue to make sure we weren't out of line with our position. And I think that what really came of that, there's a lot of traffic calming measures available that are acceptable from a traffic engineer's perspective that can accomplish similar objectives combined with good enforcement to really accomplish what the neighbors want, and that's to slow cars down. And so I think we've taken the position on that for a lot of reasons, but certainly the safety improves. And at night in El Dorado Hills is perfectly dark. We don't have stoplights that light these speed bumps out, whereas like in Folsom you have street lights lining all the intersections so you can see these devices. And if you're a resident living near a speed bump, you listen to that traffic noise going over those things at 20 miles an hour or whatever people hit.
And I used to work in a municipality where they did allow for speed bumps, and that was the #1 complaint about speed bumps is not in front of my house because they are extremely loud, not only from the bump itself, but then from the vehicle accelerating thereafter the speed bump. And then there was one other case study, and I forgot what the municipality was in the Bay Area, but the agency got sued because the motorist, it's called curbing effect, where they go towards the curb to stay away from the bump because that's where the gutter is, and they were going so fast that they actually jumped the curb and then hit a pedestrian and killed the pedestrian. So, and unfortunately, we can't design for stupid. We design for normal human beings that are going to drive a normal speed limit. And so at this point, El Dorado County does not feel it's justified to take in that kind of liability and risk and instead work with CHP, law enforcement, do good engineering designs that will work for emergency vehicles and with the average general public, and then go from there. So thank you very much, Tim, actually, for bringing that up. Okay.
Okay, can we close this one off? More to come, obviously, once we get the road opened up with measurements, start looking at what the traffic circulation is and stuff, and we will undoubtedly have to do some corrective actions. It's just a case of when, how near term is it versus it's something that as the traffic grows over time, it's got to be put in with one of these warrant triggers being met or something else. So, okay, I'd like to move on then to the last two items I had. Probably taking way too long here. Yuba County, Marysville 14-4 Homeless Triage Center field trip. There was about 22 of us, I think, who made the trip up to Marysville. Yuba County has a facility that's on county property where they have a series of tough sheds that they use for homeless triaging. They have 3 major encampments. There's a river system up there, the levee, and the homeless kind of move back and forth between that. They come to the triage center. The basic cost to put that in initially was $180,000, and it took them 3 months to do it because they said, we're just going to go do it. So there was some litigation, some lawsuits involved with it, a number of other things, but they did it. It's been successful. Sutter County is consequently pursuing the same basic thing. But each of these tough sheds, there's no power. It allows 2 people into it. insulation, so no heating devices, anything else. They do have a central area where they have a barbecue and stuff, kind of their social area. They have an area where they allow dogs. There's a dog pen area associated with that. They do have a fifth wheel trailer that's there that's got natural gas in it and stuff and heat, so I suppose if it turned really, really cold and people just needed to get out of the cold, they could go into that. But it's not a fancy place. It's meant to be, come here, we need to do an assessment on you, we need to understand what your needs are, we need to get you in the right programs. And originally they started out with like an 82-day limit. You're in and then you have to be moved somewhere else, and then it kind of grew and it was up to 6 months, and now they realize there's a few exceptions, primarily where you have a mental health condition, mental illness, and they need to really understand the more details of that before they can send a person to the right kind of a treatment facility. So it's an idea that we want to try to determine what are the best aspects of that we could possibly implement in El Dorado County. And there's been a couple of facilities that have been talked about. The one that's probably the highest likelihood is the state armory. And I say state because it was part of the National Guard Armory, but it's owned by the state of California. The governor recently, well, first time around, the governor said, I want to take all the surplus property in California, identify it for affordable housing. So he identified the Armory in Placerville for affordable housing. If you don't know where it is, it's basically just up the hill from where the El Dorado County Fairgrounds are. It's up close to Rayleigh's, up in the top of the hill there. Pardon? Okay.
UBR, University behind Ray.
Yeah,
It used to be the community college.
Very few people recognize that, but they understand what Rayleigh's is. So but anyway, recently the governor came back and said, no, I'm willing to consider using those facilities that the state owns for homeless sheltering, homeless navigation paths, and homeless whatever. And so in discussions between the county and the city of Placerville, they had a 2x2 meeting, which is two of the city council members and two of the board of supervisors. I'm not one of those because it basically is not my district, so it's Brian Beerkamp and one of the other supervisors. They proposed the use of the armory as a homeless facility of some kind, to be determined, because it's a pretty nice building and it's in reasonably good shape. And so that's going to come back to both boards, and there will be a decision made to pursue that, whether or not you can bring funding into it or not. But the thing that needs to be understood here is that there's a desperate need to do something in El Dorado County. We just can't continue to ignore the homeless. I know the sheriff will tell you he's pretty much solved most of the homeless problems, but not by what we see in the nomadic shelter numbers. And that's been going on since November and ends in the end of March here. So we definitely need to do something. The governor's putting money behind it, and hopefully sends money directly to the counties, and then comes and witnesses what can happen if you get out of the way and the state doesn't audit you to death and administer you to death, which you can really do with some solid funding given the community interest in doing it. But there is one related item I'd like to talk about, and I'll take questions. There is a community town hall meeting that's been scheduled Sunday, March the 8th, and it was in the Mountain Democrat today, so I assume it's going to be in the Village Light. But it's at the Placerville Town Hall, 549 Main Street, and there's presentations and panel members to talk about various things. So Bill, this is all associated with homeless housing. Bill Roby, who's the director of El Dorado Community Foundation, is going to be talking about philanthropy and affordable housing and homelessness. I was asked to be the speaker reporting on the field trip to 14-4 with more details than I'm going to give you here. And then also the action plan that El Dorado County is putting together, supporting housing for the homeless. And then the third speaker is Cheyenne Purrington, who's the director of the South Lake Tahoe Homeless Coalition, who's going to talk about the coordinated entry program for homeless people in El Dorado County. So anyone who's really interested in understanding more about the homeless situation and what El Dorado County and the city of Placerville are trying to do are welcome to come to that. I'd also encourage you to join our El Dorado Opportunity Knocks, EDOK, Continuum of Care, COC, which we had operating in El Dorado County now for about 2.5 years, which is a coalition of city government, county government, faith-based groups, nonprofits, and people generally interested in trying to help the homeless. It's where the decisions are made in terms of grant applications to bring in federal money from HUD and other sources. It's where the strategic planning for our homeless action plan, I'll call it, is being prepared. So if you're interested in that, EDOC is the organization to join. They hold quarterly meetings for the general public, and then there's board meetings in between those, but can get you in touch with all that. But that's the 14 Forward project, trying to best practices, and this actually won a California State Association of Counties, a CSAC Challenge Award, similar to what our hot team did in El Dorado County. We had two awards that we won this time around in 2019. One was the hot team activities, and the other was our hub facility operations, where we go out to the library systems with mobile units and nurses and people, and try to help people in their area get proper dental care, get proper medical care, do psychiatric assessments where we can, those kinds of things. So that's the hub. So we won 2 challenge awards. Yuba County won 1, and this was their challenge award as a best practice, which is why we went and took a look at that. There's a lot of other models out there, there's videotapes, etc. But all we were trying to do is gain enough interest and initiative to really try to make something happen in El Dorado County, because we stalled out on this several times. Some of you may be familiar with the Hangtown Haven event that happened up in Placerville, and some called it a success, but most of it said, well, it didn't really turn out to be what they thought it was going to be, and we'll leave it at that. So that's what the 14 Forward is all about. So, yeah, Kay.
Yeah, isn't that armory part of the fairgrounds?
No, it is not. I think it's actually shown within the boundaries of what they call the fairgrounds, but it's owned by the state. The state owns the buildings. So whether or not there's a lease or something, because what the state has offered basically is to lease, long-term lease to anybody, i.e. this would be the city, any municipality that has control over the facilities they're talking about, they're willing to give you a long-term lease for that use of that facility. But it's, as I understand it, the fairgrounds has no valid claim for that property or the use of those buildings. So there'll be more to come on that. But I was told that that's been researched, and the answer is no. It's owned by the state, and the state can use it in any manner they choose, and they're choosing to use it as a homeless site. Potentially. There's other places we could use in El Dorado County. But that is a structure that's already built. It would take some renovation, it would take some partitioning and stuff, but I mean, that would be the quickest way to get something done before next November when the cold season hits again. It would also provide some summertime relief when you have very, very hot conditions, a place where the homeless could go when it's 105 outside and stuff and not have to be in that all day. So, cooling shelter, what do you want to call it? So there's a number of things like that the Armory would be more suitable than other locations. But we'll see how it all unfolds. It's got a long path to get there. It's going to take funding, which hopefully the state provides, and it's going to take a concerted effort by government to do the heavy lifting and make it happen. There's going to be a lot of objection to it, guaranteed, right? So we just have to face that as it comes. So that's the 14 Forward. Anybody have any quick questions on that one? Okay, the last one was really easy. Our vegetation management ordinance, enforcement starts June 1st. We sent out letters as of the middle of February notifying people that we knew had an issue with not having 100 feet of defensible space. And so we've been working with the local fire departments to try to identify those. In El Dorado County, we've actually targeted 2 areas that are not within El Dorado Hills. But one of them's up by Slide Park and the other's out near Garden Valley. To basically do additional inspections, because CAL FIRE told us those were very high-risk areas that they're not going to have the crews to be able to do inspections on this year. So we're training special people to go out and do the inspections on those 2 sites. So we're hiring a full-time inspector, and we're also hiring a seasonal inspector, the way it's set up. Originally we're going to contract with CAL FIRE. That all kind of walked away. I'm hoping eventually to be able to do more contracting with the local fire agencies, but this is the way we're headed for now, and we'll just see how all that progresses. But if you have a piece of property that hasn't been properly maintained from a vegetation management perspective, get started on it now, because it's going to take some time. And there are services to assist. All of our fire state councils are set up to assist people. They actually have some grant monies and some funding for the elderly, those people who are somehow handicapped and not able to do the work themselves, or are just struggling with the finances to make things happen. So there are provisions to help people in limited categories. But it's something that's becoming real in El Dorado County, and everybody needs to understand it. We're not expecting overnight results, but we do expect progress over a series of years, if that's what it takes to try to get to the defensible space condition consistent with the ordinance. So with that, I'm assuming there's no questions on that one, because you're all in compliance, right? So I see nothing but smiles. Okay, we're all good. So I'm going to then go ahead and turn it back over to our leadership team for our progress reports. And I'll note that Andrew Brown from CHP is here, so let's let Andrew start, and then we'll move from there.
John, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
I've lost track of where the Costco project is. Are they in negotiation to buy that property?
They're in negotiations to buy it. It's at the, well, I don't know how far they're into escrow. We are expecting an announcement imminently. As I understand it, it should be happening within the next couple of months, but these things always seem to take longer than most people estimate. So I don't know what's really going on the inside of that escrow process, obviously, but we're expecting it fairly soon. So.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Can't wait to buy my hot dog at Costco. Well, we'll see.
I can't wait to park downstairs and go to the escalator and buy my hot dog.
Okay, I'm Officer Andrew Brown with California Highway Patrol. I'm the Public Information Officer here and also the Community Resource Officer. So this last couple of weeks we've been aggressively enforcing registration violations. By that we've been impounding over 50 vehicles over the last 2 weekends. For expired registration for over 6 months, or vehicles being operated or parked on public roadways with planned non-ops on them. So vehicles that should not be on the road or people that are not paying their registration. So it's a touchy subject. Thanks to political actions the past couple of years with registration costs and fees, we understand that fees are going up. We understand that. But we're aggressively enforcing the laws in the state of California when it comes to registration of vehicles on the roadways. So that's kind of a touchy subject for many fearless persons online when we do post about that kind of enforcement. But just understand we need to maintain the roadways and accurately be able to fund this county and the roadways based on the vehicles that are operating on these highways. Your vehicle's tires are touching publicly funded roadways. It's essentially that tax that we need to pay to do that. So the highway patrol is there to enforce that. It's an easily enforceable law, and we do it pretty well. Also, currently I'm the area's coordinator for the Cal Reg or CHP Reg program, formerly known as Cheaters. It's basically a program directed towards foreign registration scofflaws. Persons that continue to register or have not yet registered their vehicle in California but continue to register their vehicle out of state, where it is attractive to register your vehicle at a cheaper state that you once came from or have a rental property in or a business elsewhere. We have over 1,400 open cases currently that we're investigating just for our specific geographical area of persons that have out-of-state registration that potentially could be needing to register their vehicles in the state of California. Also, it's huge because it's lost generally widely called tax base for the state of California, and also not having accounting for specific numbers of vehicles registered in our county, therefore gives us a disproportionate funding for our motor vehicle account. So if we have vehicles registered in El Dorado County, at your address that you're living in, proportionally the funding of the motor vehicle fund comes to El Dorado County. That means it comes to DMV funding, it comes to California Highway Patrol funding, it comes to a lot of things that are associated with you registering your car where you live right now. It is very tempting for persons, say for example, to pay your $75 pickup registration fees in Texas when you pay over $600 in California. It's very tempting, I understand. But just understand that if you're a resident per the California Vehicle Code in the state of California, or you are operating a vehicle and you are a resident in the state of California, the vehicle needs to be registered in the state of California. It's a big, big problem that we're having in the state right now, thanks to, again, like I said, to SB1 and things like that have increased our registration fees and fines, things like that. But it's a big problem that we're trying to overcome. Like I said, we have over 1,400 cases that we're currently pursuing right now in our county, and still yet to even come close together. Yes?
So one of the guidelines is of course when you can when you must register in the state?
So you have 20 days once you establish residency in the state of California or employment in the state of California. You have 20 days to register your vehicle in the state. Period. Yes.
How does it work for people that come in here for 6 months and then they go back to another state for the rest of the year?
Sure.
And their car's registered in that state, but they drive it here and they have a residence here.
So the 6 months plus 1 day. Wherever you're spending 6 months plus 1 day. And also one thing that's very publicly available to me and my department and in our investigations, where are you filing your tax, your property tax shelter? So where are you filing that this is your primary residence? That's very easy to know. And you're testifying to the IRS and the Franchise Tax Board that that is your primary residence. If you're manifesting that your primary residence is in the state of California, then that is prima facie evidence that you are a resident of the state. And all your vehicles registered to you or operated in the state must be registered in the state of California. So your vacation home in Idaho, Utah, your VRBO somewhere else, and you have your $800 a year vehicle registered to your vacation rental, doesn't fly. So we are coming after you. Continuing to register the vehicle in or out of state, and you are a resident of California. So if you are a resident of California, have established residence, and you came from another state in that vehicle, say Texas. You came from Texas to California. The vehicle's registered in Texas. You then again registered in Texas. It's a misdemeanor jailable violation. So we're taking an aggressive stance with this.
I got a novel concept. Why don't we lower the fees here in California? Silly concept.
We do not write policy. And so the California Highway Patrol will enforce the laws that are on us.
One part of the statement that you didn't know.
What?
Just giving you an answer.
I don't want to make it political. Everyone has to make their decisions on where they choose to live, and also the vehicles that they buy and purchase and operate on the roadways. There are registration-free modes of transportation, multimodal modes of transportation that are available that the state of California would like to push you towards, just like what we've already talked about tonight. So choosing to operate that vehicle means you do have to pay the same fees and registration that every single other person on the road is paying. So we just want to make that clear. And like I said, continue to have those expired registrations will in an impound and or citations and misdemeanor violations. So we don't want to go down that road. It's an easy thing to do. Get your registration online, dmv.ca.gov. And you don't have to meet me or see a letter from Officer Andrew Brown in your mailbox. So, any questions, any further questions about the Highway Patrol with that, or complaints, concerns that you have encountered since maybe our last meeting?
Does CHP invite comments about such scofflaws?
Yes. So the CHP has a website, chp.ca.gov. You can report any and all, love the word, scofflaws that you see that are in or about your neighborhood. Best ways that you can tell if somebody's a scofflaw. If they're picking up or dropping off a kid at school and they have a Wyoming license plate, that's pretty good face value that they're a resident of California. If they're at parking in the Blue Shield parking lot, they work here. That's pretty prima facie evidence that they are a resident of the state of California. I can't tell you, Blue Shield parking lot is the biggest treasure trove of scofflaws that we have in this country. So if you live or work there and know there, we're trolling your parking lot every minute. Okay? And trolling is the perfect term for it. We're fishing. So we're aggressively going after this. This comes directly, basically, down to the funding of the Highway Patrol, the funding of the DMV, and the funding of the Department of Transportation, and properly getting that allocated to our county. If you're living here, you need to pay the taxes here, and get the funding back to here.
So you brought up a good point. We've tried some of these things in the past, and people went to stealing license plates and putting them on their car. So I actually expect another rash of that. Yeah, can hide the fact that they're not registered here, right?
Yeah. So and that's an automatic impound. So say goodbye to your vehicle if you put any false registration on your vehicle. Yeah. False sticker. false license plate, you alter that license plate whatsoever, you bend it, you change that 0 into an 8 or that C into a 0, that's an automatic impound. That vehicle will be going away. So don't do it. Good. All right.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Very much.
Let's see. Is Aaron Lopez here tonight? Aaron, okay. I didn't recognize you when you came in. So welcome. This is Detective Lopez from the Sheriff's Department. So he's going to update us on what's going on within the Sheriff's domain. And he's napping. So look at that.
Hello. My name is Aaron Lopez. I am a property crime detective with the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. Right, predominantly I'm kind of the rover, but I'm very, very familiar with El Dorado Hills, as there's 2 detectives who I work with very closely who are just specifically El Dorado Hills and Cameron Park. We obviously see trends in different property crimes that happen throughout the year. I heard it a little bit ago, I think it was you, sir, with the blue jacket that mentioned about stolen mail. We have, just within the last week, we had over 530 victims of stolen mail. So what happens is what we're seeing right now, as we have in the past, is during tax season, we see people just going through all these mailboxes and seeing what they can get for identity theft fraud purposes. Right now, identity theft is very, very huge, and these criminals, I love to say that, you know, some of them are not the brightest, but some of them are kind of bright. And there's really so much that one can do, especially if your mailboxes are located maybe 10, 15, 20 yards outside of your residence. The only thing we tell our victims is maybe there's something that needs to change. I don't know, maybe you need to bring your mailbox closer to your house, something, or lock it. But we have seen that these individuals, they break these mailboxes. It's not that hard. Somebody had mentioned El Dorado Hills is, it's not that lit. There are very, very, very dark areas, especially in this area. There is. And I can tell you that when I speak with victims, and I'm telling you folks here, is I can't tell you how many times the simple deterrence of leaving a light on, people don't do. People still leave their purses inside of their vehicles, or their wallets, or their cell phones, and their doors are unlocked. You know, I can only tell you folks, obviously take the proper measures of what you folks think that you should do by turning on lights. You know, even when you're gone, if you're leaving home, don't go on social media and tell people you're going on vacation. Okay? Because we see a rash of burglaries. We've had these, we just had, I'm investigating this, me and my partner, this Mexican restaurant that just got hit, and a substantial amount of money was taken. The thing is that area and all those businesses, I can only tell you that we found 2 cameras in that whole plaza that actually kind of helped us. What we're seeing, especially in this area, with this particular individual, is the same one, is it's not that hard to get on Highway 50 and exit El Dorado Hills Boulevard and get back on the freeway. It's not that hard. The access here is very, very, very easily, as well as through White Rock Road. We have been working, well, can't give you too much information, but us detectives, property crimes, and our patrol teams have been working really, really, really early hours and trying to stop everything that we see that looks anything suspicious. I can tell you that we do get people from the community that'll call us back 5-6 hours later and say, hey, I saw a suspicious vehicle 5-6 hours ago, but now they're calling us. And little do they know that they were a victim of a burglary to the vehicle or a burglary to the residence or a neighbor of theirs. So what we're asking the community, because we need your folks' help a lot, as we get very, 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 a lot of information from you folks. We ask people to leave lights on. It can get a little expensive to put surveillance cameras, but I can tell you that it does work. I'm currently working cases right now with people who have video surveillance who it helps. We have this thing called social media where we blast people's face on Facebook, on our Twitter feed, and it helps because we get so much feedback, and people are like, I think it looks like this individual, and something is better than nothing, because we have all these tools that we use and systems and databases that we use that help us identify these individuals. So So right now, folks, predominantly in this area, our burglaries and mail theft are pretty up right now. Okay, these individuals are very brazen. I'm currently just working one in Walgreens right now in El Dorado Hills, and in Cameron Park, where the same individual just literally goes in there in the middle of the night, breaks the window, goes in and takes whatever he wants, and just walks right out. And I wish the cameras at Walgreens were a whole lot better, but they're not. And so if these people are that brazen enough to go into businesses like that, who knows what they'll do. And we see that these individuals, they do come from the Sacramento area, because like again, the access is very, very easy here. Now again, of course, we do have a lot of individuals here in this county that commit these crimes, but we do see a spike in trend of these people in Sacramento, because let's face it, the truth of the matter is people in Sacramento, the moment they hear El Dorado Hills, they associate that with money. And they believe, or as you can see, this community right here, it's a very, very nice community. If you compare it to Rancho Cordova, certain parts, you know, so it's just a spike that we're seeing right now, you know. And again, that's not to say that, you know, there aren't crimes that are going on that are just, that literally it's just someone can just be walking by a car and never have committed a crime before in their lives and just see an opportunity right there and just lifts a door handle and they're lucky enough. I wish I can say that, you know, we can trust that our communities are safe, but unfortunately in my business, I hate to say it, but I see more bad than good. You know? And I just want me and the property crime detectives and our whole detective unit, I want to let you folks know that we are working very, very diligently with Folsom PD and different allied agencies here to try to apprehend all these burglars, because burglars, if they did it once, literally they've probably done it over hundreds and hundreds of times. And burglars are smart. They use gloves. They use masks, because they understand what DNA is and so forth. But video cameras help us quite a bit. And like I said, just deterrents, folks, that we'd like you folks to use. Lights on, lock your doors. If your car looks squeaky clean inside, believe me, it helps, because they automatically assume that there's nothing in there. I can't tell you how many parolees that I talk to all the time, and they tell us what they look for, and it's the simple things that they look for. It's easy. Not too many of them have enough time to be casing homes, but businesses they do, and they blend right in. They blend right in. Any questions or anything that I can answer? Yes, sir.
You know, we're in the neighborhood that has the mail stolen.
Yeah.
We have mom delivery, and it usually comes after dark, sometimes 9 o'clock at night. I mean, couldn't we get a little prevention here and ask the post office to deliver the mail during the day? That would save you a lot of trouble, save us a lot of trouble. I know it's a federal agency, and God knows, you know, everybody has control.
And sir, to be quite honest with you, that I can't answer that question for you, because I don't work for the Postal Service. But I can tell you, though, that we here at the Sheriff's Office, we ask people if they want extra patrol because they've seen anything suspicious. We will send deputies out there. And I've done this when I was working on patrol. If someone says that they've seen some suspicious vehicles within their neighborhood, I will literally park in someone's driveway and type my reports in their driveway. And especially when I work graveyard shift. If that's for 2 hours, then that's for 2 hours, you know, and we will do that. But again, that only happens if people actually call us and tell us what is going on within their neighborhoods. If we don't have that information, the truth of the matter is that there's really so much we can do without that information.
Well, I'm asking for interagency coordination here, but if we can get our mail delivered at a decent hour a day, you don't have a problem.
And that is something, yeah, I would bring up with my team.
Possible?
Absolutely, yes. I can bring that up with my team. Now, whether that's, you know, going to happen or not, I don't know. You know, I don't know. But that absolutely, I can definitely bring that up with my team, sir. And see what you, yes, ma'am.
Can you address shoplifting? I mean, my burglar they just supposedly go in and pick up everything and walk right out with it.
$950?
Yeah, well, in the great city, I came from San Francisco, and my city has has taken. It's been a little tough with their new DA of what he's not doing with shoplifting and all that stuff. Now, I can tell you that here, in businesses here with shoplifting, is some businesses don't want to see prosecution because of liability purposes. So when they tell us, hey, we don't want to see prosecution, well, if we don't have a victim, we don't have a crime. If we don't have a willing victim who is willing to say, hey, we're going to go and testify in court and we're going to sign a citizen's arrest form, and they're telling us that they don't want to do that, there's only so much that we can do. In fact, nothing that we can do. Yes, sir.
I hear some of the juvenile delinquency problems we're having at Safeway here is because the store has a policy where they won't follow you out the door. And so the kids know that, and they go in there and they shoplift and run out.
And that is a true statement that Safeway has a no chase policy.
Yeah.
We are currently working on a case right now where that happened, and this individual used some form of violence against a Safeway employee, and our district attorney office decided to pick that up, which I'm glad. Even though Safeway decided that they didn't want anything done, but our DA decided that they're going to go ahead and file on that case. But you're absolutely right. Do these juveniles know that? Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with Safeway, TJ Maxx, and Walmart of just putting a deputy or somebody just at the front door, because the amount of money that company would save, I couldn't even tell you. But I know that it would be astronomical. Why they don't do that, I don't know. I have no idea. And Walmart, when I worked down in that predominant area of Diamond Springs, the funniest thing I saw was this gentleman literally walked in and he took a 50-inch screen TV and walked right out with it. No one stopped him. He walked right out with it. And Walmart, I hate to say this, but they really didn't care that much. Yeah, there was a question. Yes, sir.
It seems to me that you could get more creative with this issue. Let me make this point. A youth comes in, a juvenile, gets a cartload of booze, which is basically what they're looking for. They take the cartload of booze out to their car, which very likely was paid for by their parents, or maybe even is their parents' car. They take the booze, put it in the car, and at that point, red lights and sirens, whatever, come on, lights, and you just tell the kid, hey, you're free to go. Well, we're going to impound this car. We're taking it up to the impound lot, and your parents are going to come and get it. And it's going to be full of this booze when they show up. It just seems to me that somewhere we need to get the parents back into parenting their own kids. Mm-hmm. And once they get up there a couple of times, they at least have to start to recognize they've got a problem with their youth. Thank you.
Well, sir, I can tell you that I am on that same page, but unfortunately, there's a lot of parents that just don't parent. And
they will fight you because you're attacking their kid and you're singling them out.
No, we're not talking to kid. Kid's free. Kid's free.
But I get where you're coming from, and I agree with that. I do. And we have done that in the past by towing cars and getting these parents involved. In my experience in working in El Dorado Hills, when I worked as a patrol deputy out here, and I've come across in those avenues of things, I can tell you that parents just really didn't care.
How do they don't care?
Ma'am, I have no idea. I have no idea. So, of course, we take whatever measures that we can, as in regards to the law, what we can do, and we do what we can. We can't force people to care, and we definitely can't force parents to parents. We all, the great Judge Fimister always says is, we all have choices, but we just can't choose our consequences.
Two questions for you.
Yes,
One, is there any initiative still ongoing with the Sheriff's Department as to neighborhood watch?
Sir, I don't have that information. I don't know.
Because it was a point 3 or 4 years ago that it seemed to be fairly not aggressive, but it we support it, but the communication channels have disappeared. So that's one way to get the kind of information quickly if the public realizes that quick is better than a day later.
Absolutely.
Well, STARS volunteers were running that the last I knew, and they were operating out of the substation down here. And
well, if something, I never see anything about Neighborhood Watch on the sheriff's Facebook page or anything else. So, and the second thing is, we're sitting here saying about the kids and everything else. Has anybody communicated with Safeway Corporate Management about their policy here? Has any of us taken the step to say, other than on Facebook, this shouldn't happen? And talk to them about, you want us to shop at your store? Then don't encourage criminality in our community. Because that criminality doesn't stop with just shoplifting, because if there's no consequences, then burgle a car or go in the back door of a house, it's cumulative.
I agree.
But dollars talk. And if we are concerned about it, and we know businesses that are not supporting the idea of good law enforcement or good compliance with the law, let's just say that, then we should do something about it and get off of Facebook and communicate with the corporate and the local people and walk into the store and tell them, I'm not going to shop here because you're encouraging criminality. Now, do we have the guts to do that? You all decide.
Well, if businesses were more like Target, that'd be great, because Target, they prosecute to the fullest.
Great.
And to the fullest.
So Aaron, would you mention the non-emergency dispatch number just for everybody? Because when they see somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning, there is a number you can call. It isn't Aaron's number, but...
It's 621-6600, 621-6600.
So it's a 530 area code.
And that is our non-emergency. And you can call that. And if you see anything suspicious, we encourage you folks to please call us. Anything suspicious, because believe it or not, we get some really good cases that way, and we get these bad people out of this county. And again, these individuals sometimes, if not the majority of the time, are not from this county. So anything that you folks see that's slightly suspicious, please give us a call. That's what we are here for. That's what we're here for. We need your help.
What's the number again?
621-6600. Any other questions or comments, concerns, anything that I can answer for you folks? Yes, ma'am.
Did you catch the person that stole the mail all up and down Flat?
We are.
There's a lot.
I can't talk about this
videos
ongoing
posted.
investigation,
Okay.
but we're doing a good job on that investigation.
So, would it be appropriate if another mail experience happens? Are we doing the non-emergency number for a situation like that?
You can, yeah. Well, if you see something suspicious regarding that, and it's something, if you feel like it's an emergency, call 911. Absolutely, call 911. But if you don't feel that it's an emergency, then you can call the non-emergency. I'm not going to sit here and tell you which one to call, because everyone perceives things very differently. So you call whatever number that you feel is appropriate at that time. But if you see anything, please give us a call. Please do. Please do. Encourage that.
So you investigate, do you not investigate mail theft? Or is that the U.S. Postal Service, a federal government agency that, your district attorney, our district attorney, doesn't prosecute mail theft. That's a federal crime, right? So
well, we do prosecute when it comes to the theft side, because there is a penal code. There is a penal code regarding mail theft.
Okay.
And if your possession of mail theft, your possession of stolen property, which is another penal code that we enforce, that we can enforce in California. As far as what the feds do and all that I couldn't even tell you. They do something way different. But we have multiple penal codes that allow us to investigate mail theft. Anything else, folks, that I may? Yes, sir.
Would you repeat the number one more time?
Yes, sir. 621-6600. Yes, sir. 6600. So again, folks, deterrence. Don't post that you guys are going on vacation anywhere, because believe me, people talk, okay? And they do. We just want everyone to be as safe as possible at all times, as safe as possible, okay? And if you have a dog, that's great, especially the little ones.
They're yappy, right?
Yeah, especially the little ones. Any other questions, folks, or anything? Anything that I can answer? All right.
Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate it. Chief Lip, we're going to move on to fire.
Yeah, I'll make it quick given the fact that it's 9 o'clock, but I do want to thank Supervisor Heidel as I start. These are really great meetings we put on each month, and very great people here, and giving us an opportunity as a community to voice our concerns directly to law enforcement, fire, having a director of transportation, I think is fantastic. So it's nice to be here and be a part of it. From the fire department's perspective, we do have a couple exciting things. First, on the back table, Director Bennett is sitting here to bring some of the CERT forms. So the chiefs had a vision in our board on getting the community more involved in emergency preparedness. And so one of the steps in that program, and part of that vision they had, was developing a community emergency response team. So the great thing about this, kind of at a summary level, is this is the opportunity for neighbors to help neighbors. So the fire department has instructors that are going to come, they're going to engage with the community. Those of you that sign up for our classes, give you some basic skills on how to turn off your gas, maybe some basic first aid, how to help your neighbors. And so it's really a neat way for us to network in a disaster, which we are certainly prone to wildfire and other risk here, to be able to help ourselves, help our neighbors, and get a little more involved. Eventually this program will develop so that we have higher trained CERT volunteers that can do more and more. But at the beginning of the program, we're just looking at community involvement, maybe either helping the fire department in a special event or being prepared to protect yourself, protect your neighbors. So the information's on the back table. It's a nice flyer. It tells you if you're interested in this opportunity, how to sign up. So I would encourage you to this is a great training for you to get in any case to have. So highly recommend it. I'm excited. Again, it was vision of the chief and the board to support the program, so we have 2 of our board members here. So good program, information's on the back table, and I can chat with you more about it if you have more questions beyond that. Any questions on CERT? The second thing, and then I'll leave it at that, is that we are working on refreshing our strategic plan. So if you're interested in the future, over the next 3 to 4 months, we'll have opportunities for community involvement. So if you're watching our Facebook page, you'll see us posting about that. But coming forward in the future, once we get our consultant on board, there'll be opportunities to engage the public and give you kind of a say in the fire department direction. Other than that, any questions that you have for the fire department on anything going on? Excellent. Thank you.
All right. So who wants to go next? Start down here? Okay. Cindy, go ahead.
I don't have a whole lot for the Eldorado Hills happenings. The main thing that I have on this is on vote centers, which Elizabeth went over and Andrew went over real well. And the only other thing I have is that the APAC meeting next Wednesday.
Very good.
Okay, I'll talk a little bit about housing. We've been here 2 hours. Everybody wants to talk about housing, right? That's all we hear about. We're seeing a lot of that at CDAC as well. We were talking about it. We're trying to figure out who's engaged, where the pieces are, where the double efforts are. But we know some of the challenges. And some of the challenges that we know is we have a general plan. Most of that growth is El Dorado Hills, Town Park, China Springs, Rescue, this area, this part of our county. But we also know that 85% of the growth has been in El Dorado Hills. So personally, as a member of this committee that represents the entire county, I think the thumb has been a little heavy on the scale in El Dorado Hills, but we do need to find workforce housing. We do need to find places that people who work in the county can live in the county. I'm an employer here in El Dorado Hills. I can't find enough local people, and it's becoming harder and harder to get people to drive up the hill from Sacramento because there's so many good paying jobs in Sacramento as well. So we do need to find a balance. We do need to have more housing so that people who do work here can live here. We are a service sector now more than anything, and those are hourly jobs. So we need to find a way to accommodate those people. I know there are some initiatives going on, and hopefully CDAC will look at what's going on and be able to make some recommendations to the Board of Supervisors where we think they should put their efforts. And so we're open to suggestions. We're open to other suggestions and things we can do for the community and the economic development of the entire county as well. So Feel free to contact me through Supervisor Heidel on some of your concerns and things that we can do. We are a conduit and a voice to the supervisors to make recommendations on where they should invest some of their time and effort.
Okay, I've got a little bit more here than I wanted to have, so I will narrow the whole thing down quite a bit. John asked me to bring general information about the county general plan, and it's a very lengthy document for anybody who's gotten engaged with it because of the El Dorado Hills Central plan. But fundamentally, it's kind of like a constitution, really. It sets out goals and ideas of what a quality environment of a community is, but at the same time, it allows some latitude as to being able to evolve over time. And I think everybody likes a certain part of it, particularly that which kind of supports the way they feel the way things should be, and like to discount the parts that maybe addresses fluidity. And that's probably where a lot of the friction does occur. In the process of the Central El Dorado Hills Plan, have been communicating with the Planning Commission members in written fashion. And I think it is relevant that the plan says that the goal should be to understand what the community wants and to focus on the, quote, issues of greatest local concern. And I will have to just point out that rarely does the Planning Commission get a vote on an issue where a vast majority of that community does express what their concern is. And that is right out of the general plan. That's right out of the first page of the general plan. That's almost right out of the first paragraph. So in terms of guidance, I think on that particular matter, there's very quality evidence as to how the community feels. And I won't dwell on that particular piece anymore. I think everybody did receive in the mail the notice of the EID proposed rate increases. I think you should really pay attention to that. The bulletin that they put out contains a wealth of information. And if you happen to be an average water customer, it gives you some idea. But the document never says what an average water customer is. It allows you to presume that the rates that they say an average water customer will incur is what you'll incur. I had to make a phone call. I found a website, and they have a calculator, and they allow you to enter how many cubic feet of water you happen to use. Well, according to their average water and wastewater customer, the first year is an increase of $1.84 per bill for 2021. Well, I put my cubic feet in there. It's $26 every 2 months for me. I don't know what it's going to be until you actually go and figure it out. But a rate proposal is almost impossible to overcome because it takes a majority of the property owners to file a complaint. And getting the majority of anything, anybody, to do anything, that's an impossibility. But I do think you should show up at the 2 hearings that are going to be made public on March 4th at the Cameron Park CSD or at the very small hearing room that EID has, and that's a joke. And they're both at 5:30 when everybody is home from work. So this is all choreographed to minimize any type of concern. But this is something we should look at and be aware of because governance starts by paying attention to what's happening. And if we don't pay attention, then it happens. It's also noted that in their statement, and it was buried in very small print, as most good lawyers will do, if I can find it again. But fundamentally, it says, and after we approve these rates, but if we don't need that much money, then we won't charge these rates. But they've allowed themselves the latitude to charge probably higher rates than they may even need. But I have a concern giving more money to an agency than it needs, because I've worked for agencies, and agencies know how to spend money. So I just think we need to be on our toes, be aware of what's going on, and respond to that. This is one more expense that adds on to the cost of living here in El Dorado Hills, the high cost of living for affordable housing and everything else. And the last thing, and I did see it on the agenda here under healthy communities, the coronavirus stats worsening. And I mentioned to John, and I'll mention it publicly here too, I really think there should be an out-front point of contact in advance with the county. So people have a point of contact should things start to arise, because there's been some stupid stuff on social media. I'm reading something the other day about the panic at Costco. And I'm thinking, what? Well, somebody went to Costco on Saturday. Now that's stupid in the first place. You don't go to Costco on Saturday, okay? That's just as normal as you. But my point is that we need a quality place where we can go to with questions and everything else. And should this unfortunately evolve into something else, in an older community where we may have more susceptible victims, I think we need to be out front and be prepared to how we can support people who may need the support, who don't otherwise maybe have a close support system. And I've taken enough time.
I'll share real quick that that was for you. That's always for you. We shared a form that where you can register your protest for the EID rate increase. It's on several places on Facebook that Dick is a fan of. But it's shared, but again, it's 50+1% of all ratepayers have to file that, request not to increase the rates. That's not an easy thing to achieve. So, but if you want to email me, I'll let you know what's out.
Oh, a footnote.
Yes.
Has to be in written form.
Yes.
By letter. You can't send an email.
No.
You can't do it electronically.
We have a form you can print out and then put your name and everything.
I'm saying if you want to make it hard to protest.
Yeah. So, the March APAC meeting, it looks like we're not going to have one. So this is my Christmas present to you in March. Basically, we have a lot of projects in front of us, a lot of projects we've talked about endlessly. There's no status updates, and there's no point in bringing people out to a meeting to talk about nothing, like Seinfeld. So we're going to go ahead and defer. We're going to come back on April 8th for another meeting. We did have a few things that we have sent into the county on a couple of projects and all this. Let's know real quick for John. And actually, this letter is actually to John. On the Central Dorado Hills plan, we had noted that there's an article in the Sacramento Business Journal about an overpass, a pedestrian overcrossing they're planning in Rancho Cordova. And their design, I'm trying to remember the design cost on that, was it's a $14 million project, and they're talking about a $3.8 million design contract. The central plan proposes that the applicant will provide $500,000 in funding to design the overpass, and DOT to be able to get the grant funding to go get the rest. Well, for the Rancho Cordova project, it's actually $18 million, sorry. Almost $4 million for the design. So we're a little concerned that those numbers aren't quite up to snuff, $500,000 versus $4 million. And the fact that not only do they have to go get the grant funding to have this thing constructed, they have to match half of it. So we're talking about a $15 million pedestrian overpass. Counties can be on the hook for about $7.5 million for that. So our concern is that, the numbers that we're seeing is a development agreement, these things that can still be massaged, but, we want to make sure that these are real numbers. These aren't just feel-good things and platitudes and, give back to the county that look good on paper, but the reality is something different. So we did submit that letter as a public comment. And the other one we just did was the Bass Lake North project, which is the 91 project on Bass Lake Road that's going to be behind the Safeway roughly on the east side of Bass Lake Road. And they're coming back because they had a condition of approval for their project from 2017 and 18, or 2017, where they were going to, they're required to construct or fund 100 parking spot park and ride. And that was part of the actual Basilica Hill specific plan. It's one of the components that they were going to do. Our concern with that was that they came back and said, hey, listen, that's very expensive. We wanted a 50 and not 100. Well, it's a condition of approval, and it was good enough to get the project approved. Our concern was, okay, well, now you're coming back and you're negotiating after the project's approved. We're thinking, that there's a real concern about why this shouldn't be done now, or maybe the county doesn't see the need, or Dorado Transit doesn't see the need. Let's talk about it, but right now it's a ministerial type of activity. There's going to be a TAC meeting on March 9th, so our letter, when we responded, was basically that the intent of the original Basilica Hill specific plan and the public facilities finance plan was that the first phase of development, phases 1A and 2, would provide the planned infrastructure in advance of the full development, with the opportunity for those developers to get reimbursement as other developments came online and provided some additional money. Our concern was seeking to defer those development conditions. It violates the very intent of the specific plan, the public facility financing plan, and it violates the goals and the assurances that the public had that these things would happen. We still want to hear about it. We want to look at it. We sent in an 11-page letter that one of our members researched rather heavily. We think it should not be ministerial. We think it should be something that comes back to the Planning Commission, because it's a condition of approval for a project. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal, but it's a condition of approval, and it seems that this seems to happen because they want to defer it to future development. We're experiencing that on Massacre right now, where in the 80s and 90s, everything was deferred to future projects, undefined future projects, and here we are now. They're not materializing, they're not going to happen. So those conditions are not being mitigated. So those are the letters we sent in. We'll be happy to see you back here on April 8th. And hopefully John's not calling me from Hawaii several times next month. And so maybe I'll pick March and I'll go to Hawaii.
Good idea.
It's always a good idea.
Okay, Supervisor Heidel, I'll let you address the infrastructure issue last, but
Sure.
we have one item at the Planning Commission next week, and it's to address the growth rates that a consultant is preparing for DOT. It's kind of a receive and file. It's significant, and Commissioner Williams in particular has raised great concerns in that he believes that the growth rates are low. And we've talked to Supervisor Heidel. We're going to talk some more before next week, because what happens as a result of that, if you end up with low projection rates for population and so forth, you end up being behind the 8 ball when it comes to your capital improvement program for road improvements. If the growth rates are low, you can't keep up with your projected road improvements. And so, not that we haven't seen that around here, right? Recently. So we're going to be taking a critical look at that. It's just a receive and file, and then we're going to be probably communicating in some way to the Board of Supervisors our concerns as it relates to that. So that's next Thursday. If you want to join us, we'll be at the Planning Commission meeting. And with that, I've talked enough already. I'll turn it back to you. One more thing?
One quick thing. For the March 26th meeting, if it goes as scheduled, I have a question about that. Oh, so it's at the board, it's at the Board of Supervisors.
Yes.
Will you live stream it, as the board does?
Well, I'll have to check. I've got a meeting with the planning director Thursday.
Okay.
And
I think that'd be...
I would hope so.
That would be handy.
They have it set up for that.
Yeah.
I don't see why they wouldn't do that.
I think the chair just has to request it, you're probably not.
Okay. Hey, you know him.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go look in the mirror at home and take care of that. So I will do that.
Awesome.
Thank you. Suggestion. Good point. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back here real quick. Infrastructure. There's a process for collecting funds for capital improvements that was first started up in Missouri Flat area. It's called the Master Circulation and Financing Plan. And what that did is because of pre-existing deficiencies in the road network, the Board of Supervisors at the time decided to take 85% of the revenues collected in sales tax and property tax from businesses in this defined zone and dedicate it to capital improvements. So over a period of time, the roadways were expanded, there was shoulders put on it, there was additional striping, and a lot of improvements that have happened over about a 10-year period in the Missouri Flat area. The Board of Supervisors is currently considering another, what they call Phase 2 MC&FB. I'm personally not in favor of that because I think we've made up the deficiency, and there's no point in continuing to subsidize businesses in that area, in my opinion, but I'm one of 5. But I do think, given the deficiencies we have in our road network and structure in El Dorado Hills, it is a viable funding mechanism to consider to impose upon a given boundary, maybe around Costco or Costco and Town Center or whatever, to generate enough funding that is kept within El Dorado Hills to do capital improvements. And what that means is it's a takeaway from what would go into the county general fund to be spent in other areas. It requires the money to be spent within that master circulation plan area. So if we define it within our business areas that really need to have the deferred activities made up, expansions, improvements, etc., to accommodate growth, then that's one mechanism to do it. So you'll hear more about those discussions. I'm very open to listening to that, because I think that's one way of making sure that those funds come back to where the needs are. Again, with 85% growth in El Dorado Hills, we need to keep more of the money here to do the improvements we need to handle the traffic circulation issues and the safety issues that rise just because we have more traffic. So, enough on that one. The other thing is under healthy communities, the coronavirus stats, and I ought to let my wife speak on this because she's becoming the resident expert, I think, of everything going on with coronavirus. But she did forward to me some statistics. There's something like 79,000 reported cases in China, and those are reported cases. There's people speculating it's 10 times that, so clearly they have a major issue. We know Italy has an issue. We know other countries have issues. But I think that the thing that people need to understand is that the death rates associated with this have been associated almost entirely with people who have compromised immune systems. Somebody who's struggling day to day to start with, and then this virus hits them. But the death rate that's been confirmed for males, for all cases considered, was 2.87%, and for females, 1.7%. So that includes the Chinese data and everything else. So it's not a real high death rate, timed for crisis, and everybody rush out and do all these things. But there are going to be people undoubtedly who are affected by the coronavirus, and there has to be isolation, and there has to be proper treatment. The best news I can give everybody is we have an outstanding medical system in this country, and I think these things are probably we're going to be ahead of the game and try to take care of things as they occur. But that doesn't mean that the numbers that you hear, Placer County just reported their first incident. I'm sure, they're going to continue to grow. It's not going to go away quickly. There is speculation with the coming of the warming of the season, April, May, whatever, a lot of these flu virus type incidences drop way off because they don't survive well when the environment warms up a little bit. So hopefully that is the case with the coronavirus, but that doesn't mean it won't be back next year. And there are people obviously working on vaccines and everything else, but be attentive, follow what's going on. If you know or suspect somebody, report them. Make sure that they get the proper medical attention to determine if they do have the coronavirus, because you don't want it to spread any more than you have to. But my personal opinion at this point, to go through all the hysteria and widespread panicking and rushing to Costco to buy every water bottle they got and every can of food they got, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, I don't think we're a third world country in those kinds of situations, but be prepared. That said, be prepared for any instance that may occur, and that's at your own discretion.
John, if I could say one thing.
Yes,
now?
certainly. Say it.
Just like anything, influenza, coronavirus, whatever, maybe, wash your hands.
Yeah.
Try not to touch your face.
Yep. And stop shaking hands with people because you're liable to communicate it that way, right? So fist bumps or whatever you have to do. Okay, so moving on. Number 7, council member items. Our next meeting is Monday, April the 6th. We had planned on having Tanya DiGiorno as our guest speaker to talk about the El Dorado County Information Technology. She informed us today she has a conflict now, since I guess that's the week that some of the schools are out. So next month we will have Don Ashton, our CAO from El Dorado County, here to talk about the county budget process and other topics. So if you have any real top-level questions for what's going on with budget aspects or where Don sees the economy going or any of those things, bring those questions to next month's meetings, and he'll be able to speak to those. And then we'll have Tanya back in the May meeting, so I think that's May 2nd, if I remember right. So you can count on that. But we are doing a lot of things in the IT world to really strengthen our capabilities, and I think Tanya's got a really good message about some of the things we've turned around. There's been stuff out on Facebook about the failure of Phoenix and stuff, and that's not true. There's a lot of needs with respect to Phoenix, and we are looking for a board supervisor's perspective to do some additional staffing to address some of those needs. It's part of the implementation process. That happens with every implementation if you're familiar with big software implementations, right? You plan for the best, and then you recognize there's more work to it than what you'd hope. So, but that's just to get through the implementation. So you'll have more on that when we get into May. And with that, unless there's any go-backs or final questions or comments, yeah.
Just something that came out today from the county.
Yeah.
They're soliciting nominations for Senior of the Year for El Dorado County.
Yes.
Our John Rasper, who left, John was selected as 2019 Senior. I look around this room and most of us are seniors. And I also know, look around and see there are people who have been living in this community for years who spend a lot of volunteer time and effort. If you think one of those people is deserving of a nomination, put their name in, start the process, because there are a lot of people who deserve the consideration at least, and the nominations have to be in within the next 30 or so days.
Right.
So get the process started if you want to recognize someone.
Thank you. I think we got that out, Cindy, in terms of the Facebook and the next door.
Not yet.
Okay, so that'll be coming. We'll get it out on both our Facebook and Nextdoor accounts so people know what's going on. We kind of closed down the Nextdoor until we get past the election to try to let all this other stuff subside, hopefully, and then we'll be putting out some positive information after that. There was another comment or question? Go back? Nobody? Okay, it's a wrap then. We're adjourned. Thank you for your patience and for